So the reality is that realtors that reject the idea that they're in sales only do so. Why? Because they don't understand what selling is. The word sell means to serve. That's what the word means. And so I think too many people in the industry believe that selling somehow is an evil thing. It's manipulating people. It's convincing people to do things against their own will. And so therefore, they don't want to be associated with it whatsoever. I get it. Who would want to be associated with that? If I'm you, I would think the same thing. They reject the idea of being a salesperson because they don't want to be associated with the evil. You know what I mean?
Wow. It's so good. I mean, you look at people getting into this business, you look at even just the trajectory of what people called themselves. It used to be professional salesperson, right? And you see people try and hide behind it, change the name. So absolutely, I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the best place to start is that the understanding that sales is not something you do to someone. You're not trying to manipulate them. I'm talking about the truest art form of sales is not something you do to someone. It's something you do for someone, for their benefit. Well, what do I mean by for? Here's what I wrote down. I said, when I mean for someone, for their benefit, number one is to help the prospect to get clear on what they want. This is the biggest thing for people that they struggle with is they don't know what they want. They don't understand what's important to them. A great salesperson can ask great Socratic style questions to help the prospect discover for themselves what they find important. And so that's number one. Number two, I wrote down, a great salesperson helps prospects identify why what they want is important. So not only do they help them to clarify what they want, they help the prospect clarify why it is important. And then lastly, they present a case both for yes and no without a bias towards yes. In other words, they present a case for the status quo as much as they make an argument for the change. See, bad salespeople, the reason why people think salespeople are evil is because historically, salespeople have been made out to get people to buy things that they don't want against their own will. Well, we believe, right, that inside of the reverse selling methodology, that this whole idea of sales is something you do for someone for their benefit is to help them to identify where they're at right now. This is the status quo and what they may want to do. We call that change, and we make the case for both. We help the prospect make the case in our world of real estate sales. We make the case for why they would want to perhaps stay in the home. As much as we make the argument for, and not even the argument, we present evidence for why they may want to move. And then we help the prospect discover again for themselves what they believe is in their best interest without us having a bias towards the change. And towards the change is where all the problems come in.
So good. I think as we go through that process, what people miss is, we talk about this, you talk about this all the time, is red gumball, blue gumball. Is most salespeople think, if I've got a red gumball, I got one, there you go. If I've got a blue gumball, now I'm going to try and flip them to a red gumball.
That's right.
And that's the miss, because what we do is once we discover it, we move on. If they're not our guy, that's okay.
Yeah.
The process, the discovery, if you will, it's not for us to use something against them, to use it as firepower to change their mind, convince them to do something they don't want to do. The beautiful part of being really good at sales is helping them discover for themselves, maybe for the first time, what they actually need or want, and air it out so they can make the decision that's best for them.
That's right. The whole idea around selling is to help someone identify a problem and to help them identify, is it worth fixing? And so you nailed it. When we talk about red gumball, blue gumball, prospecting is just the process of sorting. Agents get this wrong because they're trying to convince people to do something. They're trying to convince the person to move. That's not the job. Your job is not to try to convince the person to buy a house, to sell a house. That's not the job. The job is to find people who have already decided that this home does not work for them for whatever reason. Death, divorce, baby, marriage, you name it. Whatever the problem is, our job is to help those people facilitate change that they've already initiated on their own. And so I say this all the time with agents that we coach. In a prospecting call review, if you find yourself in convince mode when you're talking to a prospect who has no pain, who has no symptoms of any pain, you should not try to present the idea as to why they should do something. That's what people don't like about salespeople, which I agree. If somebody has no symptoms of the flu and you try to sell them the cure to the flu, it doesn't make any sense. So here's the thing though. Agents argue that somehow that we're not salespeople. I don't look at myself that way. I look at myself as this trusted advisor for my client. Here's the problem with this. The problem is that 80 to 90% of the work that we do in real estate has nothing to do with actually working with clients. 80 to 90% of what any entrepreneur does is actually sales and marketing. You see, I brought up on the coaching call the other day, the book, The E-Myth. It's probably one of the best books for entrepreneurs ever written, right? And the book is about the woman who opens a cookie bakery. And she thought she was getting into the cookie business because she likes to bake cookies. So naturally, you open a cookie bakery. Well, the whole book describes this so beautifully. And it talks about the fact that she understands, well, I'm not in the cookie business. I'm in the lead generation business. I'm in the marketing business. I'm in the leadership business. Owning a cookie bakery has very little to do with cookies. And it's the same thing for realtors. People get into the real estate business all the time. They tell us all the time, I'm getting into the real estate business because I like houses and I like to show houses. I'm like, wow, that person's in trouble because this business has very little to do with real estate. Yes, you've got a little license. And oh, by the way, what does the license say? Real estate salesperson's license.
That's right.
So I don't know how you deny that you're in sales when your own license from your own state says that you are. But the point is, the 80 to 90% of the work that real estate agents do, if you're going to win in this business, has nothing to do with the house. It has everything to do with sales and marketing. Because you could be the best, customer advocate, client advisor of all time, but if you have no clients, you're not going to be in this business very long. 80 to 90% of this business has to do with finding clients. That's what we're talking about here. I mean, most of what we do is in the realm of client acquisition, lead follow-up, lead generation, marketing, advertising, selling. That's what the business is. You just happen to have a license to sell a house.
There's a movie out there, and people might recognize this quote, but if you have this problem, pick up the phone. If you have this problem, pick up the phone. If you have this problem, pick up the phone.
So good.
That's all you got to do to solve all of your real estate problems, is to generate more leads. That's it.
That's it. That's exactly right. Now, the problem is that the industry, I'll use the word leader, although I think they're very rare in this business. They don't help these new agents either. I mean, they disguise this business to be anything but sales because they don't want agents to know the truth.
Why?
Yeah, because it goes against their interest. If they told realtors the truth, no one would get into the business. No one would actually do it. And so they have to disguise it to be something that it isn't. To recruit people, they sell the dream, they sell freedom, they sell unlimited income potential, they sell you get to work for yourself. And the people who actually succeed in this business behave the exact opposite. They act with high levels of accountability, high levels of discipline. They treat this just like a business. And so that's another discussion. But real estate is probably the only industry that people argue what business they're in and they can be in the exact same industry. It's the only industry where you and I are both in real estate, but we argue that we're in a different business. How is that possible? I can't tell you how many how many polls I put on Instagram, right? And I ask this, I don't know, a couple times a year because it just amuses me. And I ask the real estate agents on Instagram, I say, Do you believe that you are a salesperson? And it's always the 80-20, right? 80% of the people say yes, and then the 20% want to argue to the death. No, this is not sales. It's like, how can we be in the same business yet look at this completely differently? It's crazy.
Here's another litmus test. You go follow around a bunch of different agents, not knowing what they do, and you'd be like, well, man,
That's a good
these
point.
are completely different job descriptions.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah, well, that's such a good point, which I think we're going to talk about in a minute. Man, that's a great point because if you look at the people who actually succeed in the industry, who make all the money,
look at their actions.
Look at their actions. It would be clear that this is a sales business. And if you look at the people that don't make any money, you wouldn't know what they did. It's like, I don't know what that person does. So the next thing I want to talk about is that the reality of business, any business, is that nothing happens until something is sold. Do you think about that? It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It doesn't matter what you sell, what the product is, what the service is. Nothing in business happens until something is sold. And so the fact that any person in business can argue that any facet of what they do is not selling is ridiculous. There is no business without something being sold. A product or service must exchange the hands of the consumer for it to be called a business. You know what I mean? It's crazy. So this is the thing. I believe that agents fail because of one reason. And that is that they don't have a strong pipeline of people that are buying or selling houses. Well, why don't they have a pipeline? Because they don't prospect. And why don't they prospect? Oh, that's right, because they don't believe they're in sales. So the very thing that they want to argue is the very thing that causes them to fail out of the business. That's the irony in this argument. Is the very thing that they're rejecting will be the very thing that has them leave the business that they think that they're in when they're not. That's the crazy part about this. Thoughts on that?
Well, you talk about people misleading people getting into the business. You look at where they tell them to focus to get started. A lot of times it's focus on these shiny things, and sometimes it's focus on your sphere. How many people do you know in your sphere, we've said it a million times, right now that are going to sell a house?
Not very many.
There's way more that you don't know that are going to do a transaction right now because you don't do it very often.
Yeah. Well, again, if we go back to how we define sales, even if it is your sphere, even if it is, let's just say you are meeting with your brother who wants to sell a house. You see, what people think selling is and what selling actually is very, very different. If you think that sales is something you do for and with somebody, you show up to serve your brother. You are selling to your brother. Why? Because you're asking the questions that helps your brother identify, should you move? Should you stay? You're assessing both. That's what a great salesperson does. But if you believe sales is evil and you are going to go there and try to, persuade or convince your brother to do something against his own will, well, then of course you reject the idea of selling. So let's talk about this though. So we talked about why I believe that realtors fail, and it's a lack of prospecting. Because prospecting, I wrote down, is a simple act of proactively contacting people that might need your help. And here's the thing, prospecting is hard. It's filled with rejection, and it's very difficult mentally for people to do. Why? Because we are social creatures, and as such, we seek out affirmation. We seek out to be accepted. And prospecting is everything but being accepted. And so they don't like that rejection. And here's the thing, Ben, is that marketers know this. They know that easy is the greatest marketing message of all time. They sell to agents all the time that, cold calling is dead and, buy our little magic widget and you can sit back and get rich all without having to do anything just for 3 payments of $19.99. You know what I mean? And it's like, it works. This is what agents are hoping to hear. They're hoping to hear that there is a path of least resistance that allows me to avoid rejection. When we know the reality is that top producers in this industry, the top 1%, it's part of our reverse selling creed, is that we seek out and embrace rejection. We don't hide from it. And this is a big disconnect Because if you don't feel like you are in sales and you're looking to avoid the rejection, you are going to be bamboozled by marketers. Now, here's the other crazy thing. How are these marketers actually acquiring these realtors? Oh, that's right. They cold call them. How many cold calls are you getting from Zillow and Realtor.com on a weekly basis? The very companies that are screaming from the mountaintops with these marketing messages that agents are hoping to hear that, you don't need to prospect and that's all old school and you don't need to pick up the phone, you don't need to do anything, are calling agents to sell them their marketing widget. Isn't that ironic?
It's so funny.
It's crazy. So, this is the other point, is that even if you still reject this idea that, I don't need to deal with rejection. Well, let's look at the other business models. Let's look at social media as an example, right? The thing that everyone turns to. I mean, I would argue that on social media brings more rejection than direct outbound cold outreach does. I mean, you want to talk about putting yourself out there. I mean, at least when you're cold calling, you're in a private room. You're not going to see the person. No one's seeing you. Social media, you're putting yourself out there for everybody to reject you. But, then again, those agents don't want to post anything on social media either because it's like, I don't want to put myself out there. I just feel weird. I don't want to get behind the camera. So the very agents that reject the idea that I don't want to be in sales because of the rejection. Well, what's the alternative? You need to seek out rejection the same way you do if you're going to go to social media, which is what everybody wants to argue. Fine. You are still going to have to make content, get your rear end behind a camera, hit record, be extremely uncomfortable doing so, and have everybody judge you. The people who know you, the people that don't know you, and that, my friend, is rejection. And if you are looking to get your emotional needs met, it's not going to happen in prospecting. It's not going to happen on social media. You can't be in business. Don't be in business. I don't know any other way to put it. Even if you're an agent by referral only, well, I've got one of the top agents by referral only at my company, at Brookstone Realtors right now. And every day, guess what she does? She picks up the phone and she talks to 20 people in her sphere of influence, in her past client database. Every day, her coach is holding her accountable to doing the activities to become what we call referable, right? It's to show up as a leader in the marketplace. This idea of sitting back and waiting and you don't need to deal with rejection and you don't need to do anything uncomfortable is just leading agents to slaughter. And it's the leaders in the industry that are doing it. Why? You asked me why earlier. It's because they want to collect their fees. They want to collect their dues. They want to make money. They want to manipulate agents that don't know any better. They want to make their money on their little fees here and there, regardless if agents succeed or not. Because if they tell agents the truth, they're worried they won't join the industry or that they'll leave the industry.
I think the way we should measure people, the amount of experience they have, is based on their failure. You look at it, it's like, how long have you been in the business? People ask this question all the time. How long have you been in the business? Oh, I've been in for 25 years. How many homes have you sold? Right? Versus if you look at a newer agent, how many homes do they sell? What if it was the same amount?
Yeah.
And those people have both faced the same amount of rejection and failure. One just did it a lot faster. So what if you're a broker, you're recruiting, and you said you have to get rejected? You have to hear no 5,500 times. You can do that over 3 years. You can do that over 12 months. You can do that over 15 years. It's up to you. But if you face it that many times, this is the result that you can expect.
I love that. It's so good. I mean, that's why we talk about this all the time, but with agents that we coach, putting them through a 30-day rejection challenge.
I love it.
It's to go out into the world and understand that on the other side of fear, which is what rejection is everything you want. And if you're willing to face that, you can have anything you want in this life. And if you're unwilling to face it, you can't bitch and moan that you don't have what you want.
James Clear has a great quote. One of the greatest mistakes in life is suffering for years because you didn't want to feel foolish for 5 minutes.